Now I'm out today on one of those beautiful sunny mornings with absolutely no cloud in the sky, and typically you would say it was awful for landscape photography, but it does depend on what you're shooting with. So today I've come out with an outfit I know will make the most of these tricky conditions, and to be honest, it's absolutely the ideal weather for the camera I'm using. Now, while I extol some of the virtues of infrared, I will show you some of my favourite images I've taken over the years just to keep it interesting. Now, I like infrared for many reasons. It's a black and white effect, and I love black and white, but also it's something which can make something out of nothing. And certain days, you know, if you set up your nice big camera with a tripod, you know, you're going to get very bland shots on a day like today. It's more spontaneous today. Now, infrared messes around with the visible spectrum. You know, you don't normally see infrared wavelengths, and what the infrared camera does is it actually blocks out the normal wavelengths of light, and it only shows those wavelengths that we don't normally see with our eye, which is why things appear quite ethereal and quite unusual. Now, I shoot with infrared film predominantly, but I also like shooting with digital, and I have a couple of converted cameras. You can use ordinary cameras sometimes with an infrared filter, but they don't particularly work that well. They're very slow shutter speeds, etc. You need a tripod. If you get one converted, it will allow you to shoot handheld, and that is a really fun thing to do. Another thing is you may consider using your DSLR, and I have had a DSLR converted, but it's far better to use mirrorless because you have that lovely electronic viewfinder, and with that you can peer through on a bright sunny day and see everything clearly. Looking at the back of an LCD, it's not so good. So yeah, great fun all round, something to break the monotony of summer, and also I think, as you'll find today, that's something which can be quite artistic, to be honest. Well, I hope you enjoyed that little ramble. I haven't finished yet, by the way. I'm going to do more, especially those last ones. I think they were really nice now that the sun's come up a bit more. Anyway, a little bit about the camera. The camera is a Panasonic G5, probably about 6 or 7 years ago. Now, I bought this to be converted into an infrared camera, but I decided at the last minute I would go for what's known as a full spectrum conversion. Now, that is slightly different to the regular infrared in that I haven't got any filter whatsoever over the sensor. Now, that means I can choose which filter I want to use later. Now, your normal camera will have a filter which cuts off infrared. It gives it better image quality for standard pictures, but mine has no filtering whatsoever, so it sees right down into the UV spectrum and right up into the infrared spectrum. Now, that lets me use my own choice of filters. Now, this is an R72 Hoya, no, sorry, it's a Hoya, it's a Cood, and that cuts off the wavelength of light at 720 nanometers, so nothing below that will show, and it gives a very strong infrared effect. It also means I can use this with different filters. I can also have it as a full spectrum camera, and I'll do a video on that at a later stage. Now, I've also brought with me another camera which is infrared, and this is a dedicated infrared camera, and this is my little Canon G15. Now, this is something I had done about 7 years ago. It's a compact camera, it's got a 28 to 140 zoom, and it's a delight, especially when you take it on holiday. You just pack it away in your pocket and you've got an infrared camera. I'll show you some pictures here while I'm rambling of my holidays. And I really like this because it gives a very, very convincing infrared effect. It's a bit more like film. And if you whack up the ISO to about 1600, you get a bit more grain and noise in there, and it gives it that look of traditional infrared, because sadly the best infrared effect was Kodak high-speed infrared film, and that went in about 2007. So you can still get a convincing infrared effect with digital, and of course it's extremely convenient. Well, that was really good fun, and I will emphasise the fun part of it, because there's nothing too serious about going out and shooting handheld like that. It's just having a blast, and I really did have a blast. Perfect weather, and I did get some nice images, I think. Anyway, let's have a quick look at how I achieved the look of my infrared images, because that's not how they come straight out of camera. So let's turn to this image here, because it's probably my favourite from the whole trip. Now, this is how it came out of the camera. This is just a standard JPEG. I could process the RAW, but the JPEG's good enough for my purposes. Now, the first thing I want to do is to get rid of the colour cast that's in there. And I'm going to do that just by converting it straight over to black and white. And apologies to my computer. So I'm just going to convert this straight over to black and white. Now, I do a few things with my conversions which I think suit the look of infrared. Now, it's more of a film look, I'll be honest. I typically go for a film look. The first thing I do is I crank the exposure up a little bit to give it a bit more brilliance, because the thing about infrared is it's just all about that light and the vegetation glowing. So I crank that up. The next thing I do is I whack the contrast right up. Now, initially this is going to ruin the image. It's going to spoil it, because now it's gone far too harsh and the shadows have gone. So I'll crank the shadows up now to pull out some of the detail that's in there, but it's got a bit of a smooth look, a bit of a digital look. And if you look at it now, it's a very, very sharp image. It's a kit lens and an old sensor, but extremely sharp. Yeah, nice enough, but it's got no real atmosphere for me. Now, this is where I do the last two stages. Now, these are the important stages for me. The first thing I do is grab hold of the clarity slider and I move it to the left. Now, everyone's always grabbing the clarity slider and whacking it to the right to enhance that sort of mid-range contrast and the detail. Well, I go to the left, and if you see now what happens to the image, it's going very, very, well, ethereal, one of my favourite words. It's going ethereal. It's got that sort of magical glow about it. Look at it now. It's not as sharp. It's just got that beautiful aura around it, typical of the old infrared films. But the last thing I do is to get some grain into it. Now, I love grain, grit, noise, whatever you want to call it. So I'm going to whack this grain up here on the right hand side quite high, and I'm going to put the roughness up as well. Now I don't tend to like messing about with the size. The size tends to spoil it a little bit for my liking. It's not a great simulator. But if you look at it now, it's got a much more dramatic look to my eye. It's more three-dimensional. And at this point I would dive in and start messing about with dodging and burning, because I love dodging and burning. I would typically dodge out some of these trees here to make them even more magical. This one over here needs a bit of a lift, and dodge out these here behind in the centre, so your eye is drawn to the brightest parts of the image first. This one here in front of the house. Also dodge out the gable end of the house itself, because I like that to be a strong feature, and you can see you're getting there already. The other thing I like to do is to give it a bit of a vignette, not too excessive, but something to sort of focus the eye in on the centre of the image. And at this point now I'd start messing about more and more, but I think it's probably just easiest if I show you the final result of my messing around, which is this one here. Now this is what took me about 10 minutes to do, and I have it saved as a preset, so I can just go into all those images I made on the day and I can just apply that preset. And after I've done that preset, I can go in and then do the individual tweaking of the dodging and the burning. So yeah, that's the image, that's the sort of look I'm going for in my pictures, and it is quite close to the old Kodak infrared film look. It's gritty, it's grainy, it's got a beautiful aura around it, and that's all down to the clarity slider, but go left. Always go left with the clarity slider and you'll give it more of a glow. Anyway, so you enjoyed that little bit of a ramble along the canal side and a quick look at the processing. I'll be out more with the infrared cameras this year, and probably film as well. Hopefully a lot more summer to come. So yeah, I hope you enjoyed the little look, and I'll see you soon.